And thanks for coming in this morning. We don't have a lot of resolutions or any resolutions this morning. We talked a little bit about whether we should cancel the meeting or not, but I thought it might give us an opportunity to be a little more informal and get some ideas of where we want the committee to go. I should ask, are there any changes to the agenda?
Didn't get one, so I don't know.
You should have got it electronically.
Well, maybe there's one electronically.
Let me read it just so you know, it's not a big agenda. 1 was called to order, 2 changes to the agenda, 3 is public comment, 4 is chair's report, 5 is county administrator's report, 6 is discuss goals for 2021, 7 is minutes approval for December 17th, and 8 is adjournment. So pretty much kind of standard there, Dave. Sorry you didn't get it. Katrina, I know tried to send
I probably got it. I probably did get it electronically, Mike. I didn't see it though.
Oh, okay. Not a big deal. I'm assuming, Katrina, we don't have any public comment? Okay.
No, I haven't received anything.
As far as chair's report, I would just point out that very nicely, our committee's carrying over for another year here. All the same members, which are Dan and Dave and Glenn and Ann and me, and I should say. We have had a slight change. Instead of vice chair, which was Ann last year, Dave's going to be our vice chair this year. So welcome to vice chairmanship, Dave. I think we were, like every other committee, were stymied last year, and then we'll be, at least for the first half of this year, about some of the things we might like to do. For example, I'd like to talk about if there's any opportunity to do tours of departments like we have in the past, but I really understand that we probably can't do that until we get a more herd immunity, as they say. But perhaps later in the year, if it's become safe, we can talk about whether we might want to tour the highway facility, for example, or the solid waste facility, or particular buildings at facilities, or the airport again, for example. So that's just some of my thoughts about that kind of activity, which we have done in the past. That's pretty much what I have. There isn't a transportation thing here, so I will just mention there is a little bit of news on the perennial Freeze Road Bridge. And Jeff, I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but at Dryden Town board meeting last week, Dan Lambs said that working with the state and the State Office of Historic Preservation, which we know a lot about from all we did with the Red Mill Road Bridge over the years. Apparently, as a requirement of the town, SHPOS is going to require that it try to sell the Freeze Road Bridge. And it thinks that there may be entities or places that would buy these old bridges. Now, this is kind of amazing because the town was thinking that it was going to use structural components for decoration to make it kind of look like an old-fashioned bridge. So I guess at this point, it sounds like they're going to end up with a modern bridge and have to try to sell the Red Mill Road Bridge for use somewhere else. And they were, I guess, SHPOS was telling Councilman Lamb, that there are like places in Ohio and other places that want these bridges. I sat there with kind of a strange look on my face, I'm sure, because we tried so hard to persuade Ship Boss with the Red Mill Road Bridge that we could reuse that bridge somewhere on a trail, for example. And they ended up basically kiboshing that project when we had federal funds because they said that no, the only thing we could do was leave the bridge standing and build next to it. We couldn't move the bridge. So this seems to be a change in the requirements by State Office of Historic Preservation. The other thing about this is that DOT in its approval of this one-lane bridge that the town now wants is requiring traffic lights at both ends. And of course, town of Dryden has no traffic lights that I'm aware of that it maintains. And we know that as part of our bridge project, bridges on town roads, county bridges on town roads, which this will become, the approaches, of course, have to be maintained by the towns and not by the county and the wearing surface. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong here. Yep. So I don't know whether the town's going to ask us to take on these lights or not, but since it's the town's action that is leading to the requirement of these, I would have a real hard time recommending that we would take over any lights like that. So we haven't had that request, but I wanted to give you folks an alert about what's going on with that bridge that I've heard as of last week. You look quizzical too, Jeff. I don't blame you.
I hadn't heard any of that from Ship.
I think it's fairly new here.
I don't know.
You don't have to say anything more. I understand. Any questions that I can answer before we go on to Jason? Morning, Jason. I know you had the county telephone call this morning.
All right. Yeah. Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Dan, Dave, Glenn, everyone.
How you doing?
Jeff, you were just telling me how much you wanted to get into the streetlight business. I don't know what you're pausing at.
No, these aren't street lights. These are traffic lights.
That's what I meant. Traffic light business. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
You're muted, Jeff.
Jeff.
You're muted, Jeff. Jeff, you're muted.
You're muted, buddy. I don't know what you're saying. It's profound, Jeff. It's good.
You know, that thing like has a mind of its own because I clipped on it a couple times. I must have double clicked it. Sorry about that. I thought it was obviously thought it was not muted. I could hear your response there. The county does have 3 traffic lights that we maintain. We have a contract, an annual contract with a vendor that comes out of Syracuse that does that work for us. It's not cheap. It's not something that I would voluntarily want to do. And I wouldn't want streetlights either, Jason. So
I know. I was joking. That's why.
I know. So
all right.
just so everybody's aware, we do have a few in the county: Warren Road, Pine Tree Road intersections. Those are some streetlights that we maintain, but they're not easy for us. Is I guess what I'm trying to say, that we have to hire someone to do that work for us. So just wanted you to be aware. Thank you.
I remember back, I was on the Public Works Committee, I think it was called back then, when this issue of putting the traffic light up on Warren Road came up. It was the first one that we ever had to consider for the county. And we ended up authorizing it, but as you say, it's expensive and it's not something we do very often.
No. So just in terms of updates, I think there isn't any new in terms of COVID or vaccine updates from what we talked about on Tuesday. Obviously, we should find out today or tomorrow if we're going to get vaccine in the community for next week. We're hoping we are, and we'll do what we do with respect to getting it out on the street as quickly as, or getting it, I'm sorry, in people's arms as quickly as we can. We'll know more, and we'll put more information out when we know if we're going to get that allocation. Hopefully we'll know by tomorrow if that's possible or not. I did send out earlier this morning to the legislature the interim budget impact state report from the executive budget that was issued. I have not had a chance to look through it. There is, I think, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, if you've heard, I believe they continue with the same CHIPS allocation. I believe Bridge New York is funded, but it does not include the $65 million for extreme weather recovery for municipalities. So I think that's a change. I don't know monetarily what that is yet for us, but that's all I've been able to look at so far, infrastructure-wise. I'll be looking at it this week, and I'll try to put some notes out within the next week or so to the legislature. Jeff, do you have anything else in terms of CHIPS money? Am I right that it's the same allocation?
Yeah, I believe that's what I'm hearing as well. Similar funding levels.
Okay.
Very typical to the start of the year with the governor's budget. He tends to want to leave that extreme winter recovery out. That gives us something to try and ask for.
Right. So we'll go through the interim report in more detail, and I'll highlight for the legislature some key points to it. But that's really the only update I have right now, unless there's anything specific you'd like me to talk about.
Let me acknowledge that Ann's on now. We're glad to see Ann. And I just wondered, is the Marchicelli aid, is that in the CHIPS money, Jeff? All part of that?
Marchicelli is a separate piece that is funded. I haven't heard anything on that.
It's the same.
That pays for the capital project state share. That's where the Marchicelli aid comes in, and it may or may not be there. I don't know yet. We have a business meeting at 10 o'clock with our association where we're going to be discussing. One of the things we're discussing is that, and typically right this week, I'll start getting a lot of information, which I'll start sharing with Jason coming out. So Marchicelli has been pretty solid. It is an important part of state funding across the board. The state uses it on some of their projects. So it's generally held pretty solvent, and it's a well-needed funding source. So I wouldn't expect there to be a problem, but if there is, I'll certainly make sure to get the word out.
That's good. Thank you. Anything else, Jason, you'd like us to know today?
That's all I have for you right now.
Okay. How's our salt supply, Jeff?
We're good. We were, we're there. We usually, when our funding comes in, with our January budgets, we do okay. Usually it's in like an early fall type winter situation, getting into, late December, that we're starting to run pretty lean. So we're pretty good. The state, we're paying $52.90 a ton for salt right now, just so you're aware. That's been the same for the last couple of years with very little.
I was wondering how that
yeah, a couple of years ago, it went from about a little over 40 up to this number, and it's stayed in that range for the last couple of years. We'd like it to go back down, but it's not.
that never goes down.
There is something to talk about with relation to that on the bigger scale. The piggyback authority for municipalities to piggyback off of each other, as well as piggyback off of other local, state, and federal government contracts, was put in to extend through 2023. And I know Jeff and a lot of other departments utilize the piggybacking feature that came into play probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago now. So from a bidding perspective, that probably saves a lot of time and energy, and also helps with an economy of scale. That makes a lot of sense. I don't know why it's on a sunset clause, but it's expected to continue, or it's in the budget to continue another 2 years till the end of 2023. That was another thing in there. The other one thing that also is relevant from an F&I perspective is that there is legislation in the budget that would allow for shared jails for contiguous counties. So if there's interest for counties that are contiguous to pursue shared services due to the declining jail populations, you could partner with a contiguous county or counties to build a shared jail. That was a difference because it was specifically not included in last year's budget, which has been included in this year's budget.
Dave, did you have your hand up?
No, I was just going to ask Jeff, if, are you mixing with sand or anything with that salt, or are you running pure salt?
You're muted again.
So there you go.
That is really treating me harsh today. The only time we'll mix anything other than straight salt, most of the time we are running straight salt, but there are times when we're in the middle of a storm, we use what's called 1Bs, which is a really small aggregate. It's not sand, it's an aggregate stone. It gives good abrasive. And the reason we do that is just because the salt, if it's real cold or it's during a heavy storm, the salt's not working, or we're coming right behind it, plowing it off the road. So that saves us a little bit. Most of the time we're putting down a straight salt.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, shall we move on? Dan, I wanted to turn to you for a second. You sent out an email about TCAD. Is that anything you want to talk about today or not?
I don't think it's at a good time yet to talk about it.
All right.
Thanks.
I was hoping we could begin a discussion about goals. And I thought one of the ways we could help to put that together, you know, our administration has helped us in the past couple of years with a form that we kind of go through. And I would hope maybe their next meeting, we could be doing that if administration is ready for that. But I thought maybe at least we've got a couple of departments here today, and they might just give us some idea about things that they're prognosticating for the year as far as their programs and things like that, and things that we ought to be aware of. We don't have all the departments here, but we can talk to some of them. For example, I see Mike Hall here. Mike, is there anything that you'd like to bring to our attention that we might be seeing this year as far as FAA projects or whatever that you think are important?
Well, I think the first most important thing at the airport is to recover service. That basically relates to the vaccination program.
You're real soft. Can you get just a little bit closer to your mic?
How's that? Is that any better?
That's better. Yes.
Okay. The most important thing for the airport is to recover service this year. We're sitting around 30% year over year after having been up 20% last January and February. And the good news is that we still have 3 stations open. So we're expecting, as the pandemic impact starts to ease, that people will be eager to travel, and that leisure travel will precede business travel, because so many businesses have figured out they can conduct some of their business as we're doing it this morning. In terms of projects, the next big project at the airport is the fire station, and that's a couple of years out in all likelihood. And we'll be back to you before long as that situation matures. It'll solve a significant safety hazard on the ramp and provide us the opportunity to repurpose some of our buildings to support the airport mission. I would say that we've commissioned, wrapped up the fuel farm, just a little punch list stuff left. It's working very well. Refueling a lot of municipal vehicles in addition to serving the airport's needs. And also removed another major safety hazard, which was the commingling of fuel trucks and aircraft. So I think that the big thing going forward is to the recover service. That's an operational kind of thing. The other issue that's pretty important has to do with TCAT, and Dan and I will be talking about that next week, and then I think that'll probably work its way onto the agenda before long. We gotten as far as a site selection adjacent to the airport, and the concept of tying that TCAT facility in as a multi-mode transportation center is something that we're going to have to do if we're going to get anybody to support it. Now, there will be a lot of infrastructure money out there in the years to come, because that's how government spends money to recover the economy. The governor has announced another $100 million of upstate airport aid, but no implementation plan or date or anything like that. It was in his State of the State address, so we really don't have any detail on that. But that is potentially a source of funding, and certainly the federal government transportation pot is going to be one of the ways that the feds send money. So I think to summarize this, it's recover service. It's put in place the opportunity to continue building toward a solar powered airport of the future, and to consolidate transportation up here, thereby finally clearing up the waterfront. Now, I'll remind you that the last thing left on the waterfront will be the Ithaca Fire Department training facility, which could easily move up to the fire training facility here at the airport. So that's kind of a look ahead to the rest of the year. We expect, by the way, industry-wise, the projection is 80% year over year by the summer. So we're thinking the first half of the year is going to be very light, as the second half of the year was last year. And then we're going to start to hit, more normal levels. Now, all that's assuming that, the virus doesn't mutate beyond the scope of the vaccine, and a lot of caveats there. So that's a pretty good update, I think, subject to your questions.
Questions for Mike? Had a couple things, Mike. Any update on the CDL testing thing with DMV, or anything on the grant from NYSEG?
Well, the CDL testing facility's been in idle, no pun intended. There's room for it, but we haven't in this year really been able to make any progress on that. However, I do think it's it's one of those subjects that if that's what the county wants to do, we can probably find money, and we certainly have a partner in BOCES who's willing to operate it, and we certainly have a market out there for CDL licenses. So that's that's one of the things that could start to emerge as we see what kind of support is going to come from the state and the feds. And Mike, what was the second question?
I wondered about that grant we were trying to pursue from NYSEG.
Well, the NYSEG has been continuing to do what we referred to in the Air Force as a slow roll, which means they keep working, but they do as little as possible toward getting to the date the checks have to be written. And the good news is that our project is accepted and supported, but we don't have a dollar value yet or a time when that check's going to be written. I would say that as part of the and that's an important check, because if you remember the capital plan for the airport, that's part of trying to drive the debt load at the airport down to the $8 million we started with 7 years ago that was going to be required just to keep the airport open. So the other thing is that I don't have the first federal relief was called CARES, and I don't remember what the second one is, but it's been around for about a month, but nobody has done anything in terms of implementation. But we expect to be receiving additional federal money for the airport as part of the pandemic relief. But we ask every week, can you give us an idea what that might be? And the answer is no. You know, everybody took off with the change of administration and nobody's stepping up to it. So I think next month, Mike, there'll be a lot more to talk about in terms of, you know, what 21 looks like.
Thank you, Mike. Questions? I would propose that one of our goals for this coming year would be to move this CDL site forward one way or the other. We know the county clerk would like to see that happen. We know there's the space that Mike has mentioned at the airport. And we really need to see how we can make that happen so that we can do those testings for our bus drivers and truck drivers here rather than send them to Syracuse with the vehicles, by the way. Dan?
Mike, since TCAT's come up twice, I might as well just say a few sentences. So you may remember that TCAT had applied for a build grant, which used to be called the Tiger Grant, the federal DOT money for a potential new facility up at the airport. So we applied in 2020 and did not get that grant. And so now TCAT is discussing whether to apply again for that grant in 2021. So we're at this particular moment, it's just checking in with the three underwriters, the county, the city, and Cornell, to gauge how they are feeling about the idea of moving forward with looking for federal money.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm aware of that from the traffic and, you know, whether it's the build grant or whether there'll be some special federal transportation bill or whatever, you know, I think if people want to go forward, now is a good time to leverage upstate airport development and federal money to make that project happen. So.
Dan, I have a question. Is it your intent to get a resolution of support from the legislature to support that application as well as from the city?
In my opinion, it's not necessarily get a formal resolution, just a sense of the body.
Is our next meeting soon enough to discuss that, Dan? Is that?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we could put that on the agenda for our next meeting as something to discuss and put that down as a presentation or report rather from Dan, and maybe we could take a committee motion or something like that. Not necessarily have to go to the full board if you don't think a resolution is necessary.
It may be, I know you may not be necessary, but it would also, I mean, it would help if the legislature is in full support of that application and moving. I mean, at some point, the legislature is going to have to show commitment to that as a location and a potential interest in the project. And getting the city and the county, I know the Cornell doesn't have a resolution of support process, but while it may not be necessary, it's definitely, I think, helpful to set priorities if the legislature supports that application, because that's the first step of saying, this is the support of the direction we want to go in. Just food for thought.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very interesting idea.
Would folks like to see a resolution we could talk about?
I think it'd be a good idea, Mike.
Okay. Ann, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's worth absolutely talking with the full legislature. But so you mean doing a resolution through F&I first?
Yeah. Jason,
Yes.
could we get a proposed resolution from your office?
We can. I mean, I think, Dan, I'd like to get with you on it just to understand more of the details. I mean, I think it'll also trigger questions that probably should be answered or should at least be talked about earlier in the process than later, rather than to get this down a path of getting all the understanding up front on it. So I'd be happy to work with you, Dan, and talk about a resolution, what you think may go into it, and so on and so forth. So, yeah.
Sounds good, Jason. I'll get you something to start with.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else on that issue? All right. Anything else for Mike, or Mike, that you want to mention? Guess not. Jeff, I want to go back to you then, since you're the other department head we have this morning. And what are you seeing for your projects and things coming forward in 2021?
Well, every year is a very busy year for us with road work and everything. We always have a show a map of what we want to get done, and it really relates to a lot of the funding and information coming out of Albany. And 2020 was pretty hard to navigate at times. It was a lot of different changes. So we're hoping that resolves itself in 2021 and we can have as normal of a situation as possible. I don't think it's quite there yet, but we're hoping for that. That is really all of our road work and whatnot. But then talking a little bit about bridge work, we have a couple Bridge New York bridges that are very close to being given approval to bid in the spring of this year. I expect that coming in. That's going to create a lot of work around the office and everything. And hopefully the bid numbers come in at a good level and funding, and we don't have to look to other sources to acquire funds to meet that minimum bid.
Can you remind us which bridges those are?
Yeah, we have Etna Road Bridge and Central Chapel Road Bridge in Caroline.
We've had some resolutions on those recently.
Yeah. As well scheduled for this coming year are our 6 Bridge New York culvert projects that DOT is progressing for us. We won't see a lot of that. We do have some required levels of funding that we have to provide for those projects, but those, if they stay on schedule, are supposed to be bid out this year. Please don't ask me where all of them are, but I can tell you where a few of them are. I know that. But they're sprinkled around, and I can, we'll show them on those maps as well. I think that'd be a good thing to include. The other thing that we would be certainly looking to be successful on is the word coming out of Albany is that there's going to be another Bridge New York process. There was supposed to be one last year for the final 2 years of the program, and everything that was going on. It was thought that it would be better to just lump the two together. It had been done earlier already in the program. So I believe that sometime this spring, we'll be looking at submitting applications for bridges to look to secure additional Bridge New York funding for, bridges out there. Every year they change the calculation and the formula a little bit. So we're really not even in a position to say, we're going to do this bridge or that bridge. We really got to see what the program offers. That general schedule is sometime this spring. They'll be looking for applications, submitting bridges that fall in their criteria, and then we're hoping to hear sometime in the fall. So that's the fall of 2021 on successful funding, and then you're basically in the hopper again to be selecting consultants and starting design. And so it's out there 2022, probably like about a 2023, 2024 construction on those, just looking down the road. But that's kind of a big thing coming out. It's supposed to be coming out this year. Looking forward to it as well. Along with those bridge projects, I'm hoping to be able to push along and get some of the smaller projects that have been kind of lingering around. Station Road is one of them. We're going to be looking back at our garage improvement out here, stuff that kind of stalled during 2020, kind of get those open back up and moving forward and getting something done. As well with the crosswalk project on Ellis Hollow. Ellis Hollow Phase 3 was a great success. That came out really well. It was completed, and now there's going to be a crosswalk put in. We have funding for it. It's another project that's really it's seen a lot of different things going on, been waiting and shifted for other projects that came into the area. This is ready to go. It's a relatively small project, and they're very close to signing right-of-way documents. And once that's complete, then the state will be giving us approval to go ahead and bid that. Fairly small amount of concrete work could probably be done in the wintertime. So that could go, at any time, I think, as that progresses. That's pretty much it here. We do have a lot of other things going on. I'm working with Jason on some other goals that are coming up that are pretty exciting, but they're not really, I think, in the scope what you're talking about. But as it goes on, as the year goes on, we'll be definitely sharing some of the other things that are going on down here, and looking forward to a great year.
Yes, Dave.
Yeah, I want to bust on Jeff just a little bit. Since we got Freese Road done, I think he needs to go out and find another single lane bridge to redo.
Carter Creek.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jeff, couldn't help it.
Dave. Thank you, Dave.
Dave, you mentioned you'd be updating the map and like putting the culvert projects on it. Any chance and I realize you may not have all the state funding things, but could we have maybe for the next meeting a draft map that you'd like to see contingent on funding or something like that?
Yeah, we usually we provide, well, I do have that because we provided a very draft map at budget time last fall.
Yes, so I know you did.
We can update it. You know, it really does get tuned in and more accurate as we know more. But certainly next month, I usually go to March meeting because we're kind of getting into knowing a little more. But I could do it in February too. It's not a problem. You know, it exists now. I mean, I could share it now. What we generally do when it's coming up to a meeting, we kind of look at it and where we're at, what we're going to do. We start being able to add the piece on the chip seal surface treatment as well. That's generally something that we don't have added till later in the year, the March map. But
would that be all right with folks to do it in March?
Yes.
Dan's nodding yes.
okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Anne's got her thumb up, so that means yes, I think. And it sounds like that would be fine to do it in March. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Anything else for Jeff? Thank you for being here this morning. I'd like to go back to Jason. Jason has a couple more comments for us.
Sure, I'm sorry. There are a few things that just, as we were talking, that came to mind that I think is worth sharing with the group. One is Rick, Kevin, and I will be getting together to kind of talk about the capital program in general. We never, in the past, there's never really been a kind of a get together, and my intent is that periodically throughout the year, probably every 2 months or 3 months, I'll be getting together with all of the department heads that are part of the capital program to kind of do updates with intention of bringing that back to the legislature, not the legislature, but F&I, similar to what Jeff does every quarter on his kind of his quarterly update. I just think that having that tracking and transparency with you is going to be helpful, and also monitoring the projects as they go along. So I just want you to be aware of that. We'll be meeting shortly in the next week or two internally to kind of start that process, and then I'll communicate out to those impacted department heads, and then we'll set a schedule up to bring that in front of the F&I on a regular basis. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. Also, since you're talking about work plans, what the department heads on the call don't know right now is that probably early next week, I'll be sending out some guidance to develop their work plans internally, similar as we've done every year. So they'll have a little bit more formalization of their departmental work plans for the year, and we'll talk about what's on their plate coming up. And as we have in the past, be happy to share that again with each committee when they're completed in the next month or two. And then lastly, just want to recognize Jeff. Jeff has done a great job meeting regularly and having regular calls with some of the highway superintendents and public works directors in the county, just to keep in communication with them about COVID and any impacts they may have. I've received a lot of feedback from town supervisors that they're very appreciative of his efforts to have that meeting, and I think you've done 2 or 3 already, Jeff. So just, you know, it's a good way of communicating, similar to how we do the municipal officials call every Thursday. He's been doing something similar with the superintendents, and I know the towns have reached out to me, and as well as the village mayors have appreciated the ability for the county to foster that call. So that's all I wanted to share.
Let's add our thanks, Jeff, because I know Dryden Town, for example, had a lot of had an incident with COVID. So I'll just leave it at that. Some sickness that was serious. So. Okay, any further questions for Jason? Before I turn to the committee members, see if you have any thoughts before we wind up today. And I just wanted to say one thing I'd like to do, if everybody thinks it's a good idea, would be to bring the folks in on trails again. I think it's time we had an update on what's going on with the various trails. I hear on Dryden Trail, for example, that they have now been able to get a permit from New York State to run the trail by the game farm, the state game farm, near Game Farm Road. And that had been a long process that the town had been working on, trying to bring this trail from Ithaca line all the way out to Freeville. And the other issue with that that's raised its head is this idea of having a footbridge across Route 13. I guess that's becoming more controversial as far as costs and other things are concerned. So we might want to have an update on that. Dan, you probably got some trail issues over your way, and maybe the rest of you also. But I think it would be a good thing for our committee to see what's happening countywide with trails. They're a good source of tourism. They're a good source of alternate transportation for folks going to work, say into Cornell or other places. And it's important that we pay attention to them. Ann, see your hand up.
Thank you. I know we don't have Varel here today, but one of the things that I brought up at the beginning of the year, which kind of I didn't bring up again because we had COVID to deal with and just basic maintenance and safety in our buildings as far as health wise. But one of the things I had brought up earlier was to figure out how we could get more water fountains in our building, which coincides with what Amanda Champion had brought up as far as trying to get away from plastic, single-use plastic. So I'd like to just put that on the radar again, to get water fountains that you can fill up your water bottles and drink out of. And then another thing that, again, Arel isn't here to talk about, but just to talk more about safety precautions in buildings, safety checks, maintenance checks, what's our procedure for doing that so we don't have things that happen again, like, a loose flue and carbon monoxide buildup, for instance. I just want to make sure we're doing everything we can to make our buildings safe. Thank you.
Sounds like a plan. Others? Dan?
Yeah, well, one's just a smallish thing, but it's been on the list literally for many years, which is just getting a sign on this building. I'm just wondering how we can uninstall that little task. And then the other was something that was on the list a few years ago and it got lost. And I'd like to put it back on, which is a neighbor notification process. The county doesn't do a lot of land use, construction stuff. But what put it on the list years ago was the DOT facility up by the airport, and some of the neighbors there raised some concerns that they weren't notified, and we decided we were just going to revisit our neighbor notification policy. So I'd like to see that happen.
Lisa?
I just wanted to say, I think last year we did create a policy on notification of construction. I'd be happy to send it to, because based on your feedback, Dan, we can put that in the checked off list perhaps.
All right, we already accomplished.
Got that one checked right off the list. That would be nice of you, Lisa, if you could send that out so we could look at it. And Dan, that's always an issue because so often neighbors don't hear about anything till the spade's in the ground, and then they say, why didn't you notify me? And despite press releases and other things that we do, you never get through to everybody. So, but anything we can do to help is being a responsible government, I think. Glenn or Dave, any thoughts that you'd like to see for next year?
No, I'm fine.
I don't have anything more, Mike, at the moment. I'm sure there'd probably be something around solid waste, but I don't know what it would be at the moment.
Well, we're going to want to see how the new contract starts. You know, what's happening out there. I know, Dan, you had a question about garbage tickets, so maybe we can find out about those too at some point. Okay. Well, that's been, I think, a reasonable conversation for today.
Oh, Mike, one other thing.
Sure.
I think in conjunction with public safety, we should be talking about the jail facility.
Okay. Hopefully Katrina's making us a list here of the things we're talking about, so we'll be able to review them when the minutes come out.
Just as a reminder, we have slotted in the capital program about a $4 million project to be done between this year and next year at that facility. Maybe next month, the Ralph can kind of give an overview of some of those items that were supposed to be put in that improvement list, because we would be looking to engage with an engineer in the near future and start the preliminary, the design of it, and probably look to bid it later this fall or in the winter, so that it can be implemented or constructed next spring.
Okay. Can we move to minutes? December 17th? Is there someone want to move them?
Yeah, I'll move.
And seconded by Dave. Any discussion? Let's vote. Dave,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Glenn,
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
I vote yes. So that's unanimous. Anything else this afternoon, or this morning?
I
Again,
just want to say sorry for getting in late. I had a little computer problem and had to eventually call in on my phone. So sorry about that.
oh, geez, that's all I have is computer problems, trying to get into these Zoom meetings at my home, so I don't feel bad at all. Thank you. We're glad you're here. All right, so I'm just trying to think if we're missing anything before we close up today. I want to thank Lisa for being here, and thank Katrina and Brittany for administering our meeting for us. Thanks, Jason, for being with us in your update. Thanks, Mike and Jeff. And again, our meeting schedule will be the same. It'll be this third Thursday, whatever today is, at 9 o'clock. So that'll stay the same. Third Thursday.
Yep.
Ready to adjourn? Thank you all. Have a good morning. We're adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
So long.